Sorry about the last video. I got cut off for a second, but as I was explaining with the color light, which the HLSL and the shader color light. Let me show you that again, actually. So the shader color light, obviously I'm setting the buffers and the variables in them. So with the shader color light, I have to set them to context, so I gotta make sure they're setting the vertex shader and the pixel shader. And then here's the fog parameters, easily setting the fog parameters with the fog buffer. So in the color light HLSL, basically, using everything that we did before with directional light, point light, spotlights, and then I have my own new C buffer for fog parameters, which is in register 3. Pretty simple. Here, all the way at the bottom, is the vertex shader, which I made sure everything was being outputted, and then the pixel shader made sure the fog was being used. So the next one up is the shader texture. So this one does not incorporate light, but it does incorporate fog. So obviously send fog parameters. Same exact thing. Well, actually no, it's not the same as the other ones. I had made a separate send I position world because we need to see where the object in the world is compared to the camera, like where you are, so then the fog will actually interpolate. So I have a I position world structure, which also I'll show you the C buffer for that in a minute, but I have the I position world and I do have the fog data here again. Try put in the I world, but it'll work a little bit better in its own separate thing. So again, with the in the constructor, I'm setting the buffers, and then I am doing I have to set them to context, obviously, for the VS and the PS, and then I'm setting all the fog parameters over, setting those into the buffer, and then I'm also doing the I pause world. So in that associated shader is just the texture. So we have the C buffer for cam, instance, and then here's the fog, and then here is the I parameters. Pretty simple. Not much code really was in this, but I did put in the fog stuff here. And this is making sure that at least a number is here to render the fog, or it just does a basic, just returns the texture. Oopsies, I don't want to do that. So the final one is the shader texture light. So same thing as before. Sending fog parameters was really the main thing that I added. And the fog data obviously is right here with its own fog buffer. Pretty simple, and has all its different structures for the light, because this one is using light. And again, I set them all here, setting the buffers up, and then setting them to context for the VS and the PS, and the fog parameters. Pretty simple. And then its associated HLSL is right here: material, fog model, directional lights, C buffers with the fog, and then all the way at the bottom is the fog demo, or the fog attributes. I could also probably talk about, let's see, I'll show you the fog, the shaders, the HLSL, the graphics objects. So we'll do that. Alrighty, so obviously the graphics objects have a base, which they have a virtual render function that we can override, and they all have a pointer to a model. So we did not use the color, but we did use these three. So the graphics object light color. Light color, I'll have a set color, a set ambient, a diffuse, and specular. So you kind of need to set these, or else the object is basically just going to be black, because there's obviously it has no parameters for the light to actually like be lit, like the object to be lit by light. So set them all here, and then this is the. Oh wait, no, that's not the right one. It's this one. I was gonna say. So its render function, it just basically gets the context of the shader, and it just goes through a for loop for all the meshes and renders. Sets color. Here's another special set color, and then we have the constructor for it, and then we have the ambient, the diffuse, the specular. Pretty simple. For the texture, it doesn't take any light, so all it has is really a set color, but it doesn't really even use a color, so because it's using a texture. So, it doesn't make sense to set a color of an object that is using a texture. And that is pretty small of code in the CVP, and it just renders it. It sets the context of the shader, sets the world, and then renders. And then in texture light, that is where we again set the texture, and we set its ambient, diffuse, and specular. But yeah, so there's no color in this one, but we want to use light, so we have to give it something so that it's not black on the screen. So in CPP, we have the render, which is pretty simple. We're just now, before I think, not here, but here. Yeah, we know, well, obviously we never did this up top, but yeah, same as before, pretty much. Rendering, setting world, setting context. Just making sure this is done for all of the meshes on the model. Here's the constructor, setting texture, ambient, diffuse, specular. Pretty simple again. And I did not put a mirror in because I was not going to deal with that. I did not have changes. But as I showed you with the DirectX app before, I try to make it as simple for myself as possible because it could get into a huge mess. So it's streamlined, obviously, to take in shaders, textures, models, terrains. All you have to do really is set the graphics object for any of the models that you use, and then you just set the light source, set the world, set the graphics object world, and then you can update. You really don't have to touch unless you want to move objects around while the scene is going. And then the draw scene is where we basically render everything. So all I have to do is really set the context, any parameters that go along with that, set the lights, and then just render. Pretty simple. And I did that for each shader that I was using. Yeah, so that's about it for now.